Hello, guitar players. I'm at AudioHipster Studio east of Atlanta. My good friend Doyen Keaton is proprietor thereof. And Doyen and I are looking at a number of distortion pedals, and we've landed on our favorite, which is the Lounsberry Nigel distortion pedal. It's a beautiful sounding pedal, a very organic sounding pedal, and the thing that drew us to this pedal, and we're two guys that are older and have completely discarded the use and application of fuzz boxes per se in our live performances or our recording situations. But this pedal sounds organic. It actually sounds like an amp distorting, and I'm going to demonstrate with a couple of short passes at a low gain setting how much this device actually sounds like an amp being pushed to the point of distortion rather than the terribly and typically binary sound of your average modern fuzz box, which is either off and bypassing the effect completely, or it's on and it's full on with that crackling, thin, one-dimensional, very brittle sounding distortion product. And let's look at the difference between the two. This is the tone clean. And this is the Nigel enhancing the tone at a very low level of gain. And I'll engage another pickup with a higher signal level to really show off its tonality. To me, this pedal very much simulates the action of an amp being pushed to distortion, and it gives you that sonic character rather than just that binary completely off and bypassed effect, brittle, crackling, one-dimensional distortion. This one sounds very much like an amp being pushed to its limits. In addition to providing an organic sound that's very much more in line with an amp being pushed to its limits or a measure of its limits, rather than the very binary, completely off or on to a brittle and unpleasant crackling, mass-distorted product offering of today, this device actually engages different sonic qualities at different levels of gain. So you can use it to bolster your arsenal of sounds and live performance. If you have an amp that sounds great and has a beautiful distorted tone, you can add a number of additional tones to it with this device. This is what I love about it. So here's an example of the amp completely clean, and the only distortion you're going to hear is a product of the Nigel. That's the Nigel at a relatively low setting of distortion. I'm going to increase the distortion about 30% so that we can get a much meatier, much toothier tone out of the Nigel. It's a very, very sweet tone. It's kind of reminiscent of the sounds you would have heard distortion-wise back in the 70s when they were using amps pushed to their limits instead of just typical on-off distortion boxes. But I'm going to push it a step further. I'm going to turn up the distortion on the Nigel a little bit, and then I'm going to add a relatively low level of gain from the amp's own distortion circuit. It's got a clean channel, it's got a dirty channel. So we're going to engage the distorted channel on the amp at a relatively low gain level, and we're going to add the Nigel at about 55% of its gain capacity to give ourselves yet another tone that we can use for performance or recording, and again at relatively low and manageable volume levels. Here we go. That's a pretty beefy tone for a relatively low setting on the gain of the amplifier combined with a about halfway point setting of gain for the Nigel pedal. So as you can see, you can add some serious teeth to an already well distorted amp with the Nigel. Give yourself a whole new range of distorted tones to select from. Let's try something even beefier. Let's go for 70% of the Nigel's gain capacity, and I will add the boost on my amp's distortion channel, so we'll get a really ugly metallistic tone. Check this out. Let's try a slightly less devastating tone. With the amp's distortion maybe a third of the way up and the Nigel pedal is maybe 2/3 of the way up, and we can get something that'll accentuate lead with a great deal of front end attack, a great deal of natural compression, but still very organic sounding. It's got a lot of attack. It's got a lot of click at the front end. It's got a lot of what you expect from a really high gain rig, maybe even with a gain pedal added in its effects loop. I've got the Nigel put on the front end, the input of my amp, and it gives me an entirely new range of tones to choose from. And the sound of the pedal itself, without using the amp's distortion, is just as pretty and just as lush as you would expect from any Class A/B amp. I'll give you a demo here. That's just the pedal. The amp is completely clean right now. existing distortion capabilities, you can get a devastating metallistic kind of a tone. Believe me, if you want an organic feedback, this pedal is the way to get it. And one of the ways that Greg Lounsberry, the owner and CEO of Lounsberry Electronics, accomplishes these sonic capabilities is by hand building these devices in a truly solid state form. And what I mean by that is that there are no integrated circuits used in the construction of these pedals. And for those of you who don't know, an integrated circuit is a layer of varying minerals out of which is etched the lines and behavior of a solid state component like a diode or a transistor. So it's basically a virtual picture of what a component does at an extremely diminished signal level. These devices have given us the digital age, and that's great for everything except audio, because when you diminish the signal to the level where it can be processed by an integrated circuit, you lose sonic properties that cannot be added back at the final amplification stage. So you lose part of your sound. And what you end up with is a thin, one-dimensional sound, especially when we're talking about distortion and the imposition of distortion. So this device is truly organic in the sense that it is solid state without any use of integrated circuitry whatsoever. That's how Lounsberry can give you a distortion pedal that actually sounds like an amp distorting. And it is indeed a beautiful tone. I'm very pleased with mine. And I'll never use another one.